Since quite some time there has been confusion around Christina Aguilera's vocal fach or vocal type. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen people fighting over this subject on YouTube in the comments under my or other creators' videos. I'd like to analyze this topic to the best of my ability. Also, quick shout out to my friend Mariah, who's an icon in the vocal community obviously, whose hilarious comment inspired me to make this video. When talking about Christina's voice, people usually claim she's either a soprano or a mezzo-soprano. If you think she's a contralto, I can tell you right away, she's not. Also, before I get into it, I'd like to put something out there. There's this misconception that sopranos always have those light, sweet, bright-sounding voices in opposition to mezzo-sopranos, whose voices are heavier and darker. Although it makes sense in some cases, you can't really accurately determine someone's voice type based on how bright or dark this person sounds. Why? For example, you have Ariana Grande and Jennifer Hudson, who both sopranos yet their voices sound very different. Or you have Lady Gaga and Lea Salonga, who both mezzo-sopranos. Okay, so having that in mind, now we can get to Christina. I'm going to analyze her voice in a chronological order, so we're starting with her debut era. Just for the sake of this video, let's actually suppose that Christina has been a mezzo-soprano since her debut. This is a statement that can be easily debunked. One of the signature vocal qualities of mezzo-sopranos is their comfort and natural fullness and weight present in their lower register. Let's hear JoJo for example. They don't tell me nothing, so I find out there's no point escaping. I don't worry any. Now let's take a look at Christina's lows from her debut. Aquel amor que por poco me llega a matar. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. I turn to you tonight. And they know that ahora que con el tiempo logré superar. The notes I chose were nicely supported and proved that Christina's lower register was actually far from weak during that era. However, these lows don't really possess the qualities I mentioned earlier. Christina sounded more like a soprano but with a solid low register. Another characteristic vocal quality of mezzo-sopranos can be heard in their belts, or more professionally said, mixed register. Their voices gain power and intensity early into their range. In other words, their voices take off and sound belty earlier than sopranos. Let me demonstrate what I mean. So these were low mid belts. It's not something that you hear often in high notes compilation videos on YouTube. JoJo didn't sing high at all, yet you could already hear how much impact and output those belts possessed. Now let's hear how debut Christina performs in the same range. Very different. What's important to note is that the difference doesn't come from vocal technique. In fact, Christina supported well in those clips and sang healthily with a lot of ease. Yet, she still sounds lighter compared to JoJo simply because the natural conditions of her voice. It seems pretty clear that debut Christina was a soprano, a lyric soprano to be exact. But aren't sopranos supposed to have more ease in the upper belts? Many soprano singers in pop can hit high notes with a lot of ease, even if they are far from being technically brilliant. In Christina's case, we can assume that it's her very chesty mix and aggressive approach that stopped her from exploring that region of her voice more. Other sopranos with this issue are, for example, Jessica Simpson or Carrie Underwood. Considering that, it's actually pretty impressive she was capable of belting as high as she did. What people tend to forget is that Christina was very young at the time, so it was natural for her voice to mature and eventually change. Now we get into strip era. I have to say, for the most part, I can't really hear any difference in her voice. However, there are two performances that in my opinion demonstrate a shift happening in Christina's voice. They're both from 2004, so it is after the Stripped World Tour. The first one is a performance of The Voice Within, where you can hear her lower and mid belts gaining more power and presence in comparison to her earlier days. However, in the same performance, when she gets a bit higher, her voice sounds almost identical to her debut era tone. The second performance is more obvious. It's the first time when we hear Christina access her lower register with ease, weight and fullness adequate for a mezzo-soprano. The same applies to her lower mid-belts. I'd like to make something very clear. Christina has always been no stranger to manipulating her tone to sound thicker and darker. She did it during her debut era as well, but you could easily tell the difference between her natural tone and more modified tone. In this performance, it sounds more natural. Her voice possesses more intensity in the lower part of her belting range, regardless of whether or not she's manipulating her tone. Is there a possibility that Christina's voice type changed from soprano to a mezzo-soprano? Let's find out. Back to basics is tricky. For example, we have this performance when you can clearly hear this almost awkward contrast between the solid, strong-sounding mid-range and weak fag lows, really untypical for a mezzo-soprano.
We belong now, and I'm singing a song for you. I know you're in a place where I want to be, but we belong now, and I'm singing a song for you. You taught me precious secrets of the truth withholding nothing.
On the album, there were some pretty solid low notes.
Only be something that happened to somebody else. Get inside the minds of every legend I've ever wanted to stand beside. Was born.
In general, Christina didn't seem very focused on her lows during Back to Basics era. Her low mid-belt sounded pretty full, while retaining warmth and brightness of her voice. Next we have Bionic. A legendary Lift Me Up performance with some gorgeous resonant mid-notes carrying enough output and power to convince me to believe that she's become a mezzo-soprano.
If you lift me up as tomorrow, if you lift me up tomorrow.
However, Christina's lows from that time didn't do too much to further support the Christina being a mezzo-soprano now theory. Another key moment is her 2010 performance of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Once again, Christina demonstrated the ease, weight and fullness of a mezzo-soprano when accessing her lower register.
We'll be out of sight.
Almost a decade after this performance, Christina's voice seems to fit into the mezzo-soprano standards more than ever. When focused, she can dip into her lower register with a lovely weight and fullness to it. Sometimes the notes don't even sound low for her anymore.
Now and they are very confused too. You're my angel. Don't you bring it
Some people say, listen to her speaking voice, there's no way she's a mezzo-soprano, she sounds nothing like Beyonce, Lady Gaga or Pink. And I get your point, but as a fan of Christina, I've noticed she has a habit of speaking higher, of pitching her voice up during interviews. It may be due to nerves or excitement, I'm not sure, but I believe what you often hear during press is not her real, natural voice.
Not having a regret, because everything that you go through does lead to the next chapter of you, and the way that it's meant to evolve in your story, and a story that everybody deserves to hear. And you guys have so much power in your voices, and so thank you for sharing yours with me. I wouldn't have it any other way. Never.
We shouldn't be apologetic if we have for our sexual side, for our vulnerable side, through being a fighter and overcoming obstacles. 100%. I think those are all messages that were really important to me.
And we're all different.
Inconsistencies in the quality of Christina's lower register are most likely a result of her lack of training and stylistic choices she likes to make, like lowering the larynx and adding breathiness.
You know, I'm talking up here right now, but if I want to go low, I don't really want to sing in that tone. Go low. Like to have a nice, rich, bassy tone, you kind of want to throw it back in your throat. And I'm almost caving in my chest a little bit. Go low. Almost like when you're going to yawn, you know, it's like, you know, it's almost that. It's